The wind howled over the frozen plains of Outpost 17, carrying sharp flakes of snow through the air like tiny knives. Jack Trent, a quiet human farmer, was checking the power line to his food shed when he heard a soft clang from inside. His boots crunched in the snow as he moved toward the sound, flashlight in hand, rifle slung over his shoulder. This far out in the colonies, you didn't wait to find out what the noise was. You assumed trouble. You were usually right. He opened the metal door slowly, shining his light into the shadows. At first, he saw nothing, just shelves of preserved food, farming tools, and fuel cells. Then the light caught movement. Something shifted. Fast and quiet, behind the crates, Jack stepped forward. Hand on his weapon. "Come out," he said firmly. "I'm armed." A small shape darted out, and for a moment, Jack was frozen in shock. It wasn't a thief, not in the way he expected. It was a woman, an alien, thin and dirty. Her skin a dull lavender and cracked from cold. She clutched something tightly in her arms. Wrapped in rough cloth, her eyes met Jack's, wild, desperate, full of fear. Then she bolted. Jack shouted, "Stop!" But she was already gone. He ran after her, boots sliding over ice. But she was fast. Too fast for someone so weak-looking. She disappeared into the snowstorm, leaving only faint footprints and a trail of blood behind. He followed the prints until they led to the edge of his property where the border fence buzzed gently with power. Then he saw her crumpled in the snow like a broken statue. Her body shook, and her breaths were short and sharp. The bundle in her arms was barely moving. Jack approached slowly. Kneeling beside her, her lips were blue, her hands shaking, but her eyes still held fire. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't want to steal, but she's hungry." Jack looked down, pulling back the corner of the cloth. A small alien child lay inside, maybe 2 or 3 years old in human age. Her eyes were closed, her skin pale and cold. She wasn't moving much. Not good. Jack made a decision, fast, and, without doubt, he scooped up the alien mother and her child. Carrying both in his strong arms, he walked quickly through the storm, heart racing. He didn't know who they were, or where they came from, but something about her eyes, something about the way she had run, not for herself, but for the child, hit him deep. He remembered another pair of small eyes. Long ago, eyes that never opened again. Inside his warm cabin, Jack placed them near the heater. He grabbed blankets, then poured hot water into a bowl to make soup. The alien mother lay there, eyes half closed, but still holding her child tightly. He offered her the soup, but she pushed it back, weakly shaking her head. "Her first," she said, "always her first." Jack fed the child slowly, spoon by spoon. The little girl opened her mouth without protest, too tired to cry, after a few bites. Her fingers twitched, just slightly. Jack felt something ease inside his chest. He turned back to the mother, who was watching with quiet eyes. She was still bleeding from her ankle, where a metal shard had cut deep. Jack knelt and began cleaning the wound. She flinched, but said nothing. "You didn't have to steal," Jack said softly. "I would have helped." The alien mother's lips trembled. "No one helps us," she said. "Not anymore." Silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the wind outside. Jack wrapped her wound, then covered her and the child with another blanket. He sat nearby, watching the fire crackle. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why was a child like that being hunted through the snow? But he didn't ask. Not yet. There would be time later. For now, she needed rest and warmth, and maybe for the first time in a long while, safety. Outside, the wind roared louder, like the world was warning him. But Jack didn't care. He had already made up his mind. He would protect them, no matter what came next. The fire crackled softly while the alien mother lay curled on the floor, holding her daughter close. Her eyes were open but distant. Watching the flames like they were something from a dream, Jack stood near the heater, arms crossed, unsure what to say. He had fought in wars, flown dropships through burning skies, and seen more death than he could count. But this broken woman and her silent child, this left him speechless. He poured more soup into a cup and knelt beside her again. "You need to eat something," he said gently. "You won't help her if you're too weak to stand." Her hands trembled as she took the cup. But she didn't sip yet. She lifted her daughter's head and let her drink first. Slow and careful, only after the child had a few mouthfuls did she take her own, her lips barely touching the edge of the cup. Jack watched quietly, noting every bruise on her arms, every sharp edge of her bones. She hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Her ankle was swollen and wrapped tight in cloth, and there were scars on her back that weren't from the cold. He saw the truth without needing words. Someone had hurt her, and badly. After some silence, she looked up at him, her voice dry and flat. "I thought you'd shoot me," she said. "Most would have." Jack didn't answer at first. He sat on the floor beside her, tired eyes watching the flickering fire. "I've shot people before," he said finally, "but not mothers trying to feed their kids." The child stirred in her mother's arms, a soft whimper escaping her throat. Jack reached for a small pouch and pulled out a sweet cube, a kind of human candy. He held it out to the little girl, who blinked at it with wide, unsure eyes. Her mother nodded faintly, and the child took it, chewing slowly, like she didn't quite believe it was real for the first time. Jack saw a spark in the child's expressions, something small but alive. The alien mother's shoulders shook. But she didn't cry. "I was born a noble," she whispered. "We ruled the stars. Once had servants, ships, everything." She looked down at her child, brushing a bit of frost from the girl's cheek. "Now I run through snow, beg for scraps, and steal to survive." Jack didn't judge her. He just listened. "I escaped from a labor station 3 weeks ago," she said. "They kept us in cages, used my daughter's blood for tests." Her voice broke for the first time, and her hands tightened around the child. "They want her back, not me," she said. "She's rare, her genes, her blood. They say it's special." Jack felt something cold pass through his chest. Not fearing her, a deep, steady kind of rage that came from knowing what some people were willing to do for power. He had seen it before, on other planets, in other wars. "Do they know you're here?" he asked. She didn't answer, but her eyes said yes. Jack stood up and walked to the window. Brushing frost from the corner with his glove, the storm had slowed, but the sky looked wrong. Too quiet, too. Still, he turned back to her. "You need to stay hidden," he said. "If anyone comes asking, I'll deal with it." She blinked, confused. "Why?" "Because no one else will," he said, "and I've already lost one daughter." The room fell into a heavy silence again, but this time it felt warmer. She leaned back slowly, her body relaxing just a little. The child curled up beside her mother. Wrapped in the blanket Jack had given them, her tiny hand clutched the sweet cube like it was a treasure. Jack stood guard near the door, rifle ready, outside. The snow began to fall again, soft, slow, but hiding something bigger. Something was coming, and Jack could feel it in his bones. But for now, they were safe. And for the first time in days, the alien mother closed her eyes and slept. Jack didn't sleep that night. He sat near the door, watching the flames flicker and listening for sounds outside. Every gust of wind made him tighten his grip on the old rifle in his lap. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. Years ago, during the border wars, that habit kept him alive. Now, it had returned without him even thinking. The alien mother slept for hours, holding her child like the world could still steal her away. Jack had placed an extra blanket over them. And even though the cabin was warm, they still shivered. Their bodies were too weak, too cold, too broken, but they were breathing. That was something. Just before sunrise, a beep echoed through the room, soft but sharp. Jack stood quickly and checked the panel near the window. A motion sensor had picked up activity at the edge of his property. He zoomed in on the old camera feed, grainy but clear. And there it was, a low hovering ship just outside his perimeter. Unmanned, scanning, not a cargo vessel, not a rescue drone, a tracker, silent and deadly. Used by slave hunters and bounty lords, Jack's jaw clenched as he turned off the screen. He didn't tell her right away when the alien mother woke. Her eyes went straight to her child, who was still sleeping peacefully. Jack handed her a warm drink and said nothing about the tracker. Instead, he asked quietly, "They're hunting her, aren't they?" The woman froze, the cup in her hands shaking slightly. "She's not just my daughter," she whispered. She's a symbol." Jack said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "They took our world years ago," she said, "destroyed the ruling lines, erased our names. But my daughter, she's from two bloodlines they couldn't erase. She's the only one left with a claim to anything." She looked up at Jack, her eyes tired but steady. "They'll never stop." Jack nodded slowly. He walked to a cabinet and opened a small metal box. Inside was a folded uniform, old and worn, with 3 burn marks and a patch sewn onto the sleeve. It read, "Human Colonial Marines." He hadn't worn it in years, but he never threw it away. Next to it was a small case inside, a tracker disruptor and a low-power EMP charge. Illegal in some systems, forgotten in others, but here it was the only thing between them and death. "We'll need to move soon," Jack said. "They'll send scouts first, maybe drones." She looked at him with a strange expression, part fear, part hope. "Why are you doing this?" She asked softly. "You don't know me?" Jack turned toward her, voice quiet but firm. "I knew a woman once," he said. "She was strong, smart, and full of fire like you. They took her too." He looked away for a moment, then added, "Maybe I wasn't fast enough to save her. But I can be fast now." Outside, a distant hum filled the air. Jack's sensors picked up a new signal, stronger, closer. Not a drone this time. A full scout craft had entered the sky, disguised as a mining vessel, but Jack could read its energy. Pattern. They were scanning for life signs. He moved fast, taking the disruptor and placing it under the floor panel. He waved her over, and together they crouched in the cold crawl space. The little girl stirred and whimpered softly, but her mother hushed her with gentle words in a language Jack didn't know. The moment the crawl space door shut, the hum grew louder. The ship passed directly overhead, casting a shadow across the snow. For 30 seconds, the cabin was filled with light from the scanner beam, then it faded. Silence returned. They waited a full minute before Jack opened the panel. The woman climbed out slowly, holding her child close. "They didn't see us," Jack said. "But they'll be back." The mother nodded, her voice flat. "They always come back." Jack stared out the window, his mind already racing. He had defended his home from bandits before, maybe once from a pack of snow beasts, but this was different. This wasn't survival. This was war, and he had a child to protect again. This time, he wasn't going to lose. Jack didn't wait for the next ship to arrive. By morning, he was already working in the snow. Eyes sharp, hands steady. He set traps along the frozen path that led to his cabin pressure plates, wire snares, and smoke bombs made from old mining gear. He placed heat dummies inside storage crates, designed to fool scanners, and behind the barn. He buried a low-range EMP that could shut down any drone flying too close. He was just a farmer now, but once he had designed defenses for entire colonies. He remembered everything inside the cabin. The alien mother cleaned her daughter's face with a warm cloth, the little girl was recovering, slowly eating more, sleeping deeper, and even smiling once when Jack handed her another candy cube. She didn't speak, not even in her own language, but her eyes followed Jack now. Curious and unafraid, that alone made the man's heart tighten in his chest. The mother watched him through the window as he worked. She had asked his name that morning, and when he said Jack, she'd nodded and whispered her own. Sarah, it was short, soft, and strange to his ear. But somehow it felt right in his home that evening, when Jack returned inside, boots wet from the snow. Sarah sat near the fire with her daughter asleep on her lap. "Why are you helping us?" she asked again. Jack didn't answer right away. He poured water into a cup, handed it to her, then sat on the floor near the fire. "My wife and daughter died 6 years ago," said, eyes staring into the flames. "They were caught in a raid. Pirates hit our shuttle just after we left the station. I wasn't there," he said, voice cold now. "I was on duty." Sarah looked down, holding her daughter tighter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jack didn't reply. The fire cracked once, loud in the quiet cabin. He looked at Sarah then, his voice quiet again. "When I saw you out there in the snow, holding her like that, I remembered the way my wife held our daughter when she was sick. You weren't stealing, not really. You were surviving." Sarah's lips trembled, and she looked away. Jack stood and walked to the shelf, pulling down a box. He opened it and showed her what was inside: several old cum chips. "Some damaged, some not. We need to prepare," he said. "They'll return. And next time, they'll land." She nodded slowly, her face turning hard again. "I can help," she said. "I've seen how they hunt, what weapons they use." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You know how to fight." "I know how to survive," she answered. "It's not the same, but it's close." Together, they began building a defense. Jack showed her the signal disruptors he was hiding in the barn wall. Sarah helped mark the spots where she knew bounty trackers would likely scan high ground, heat traces, unusual metal signals. They were a strange team, a grizzled human veteran and a wounded alien mother. But they worked like they had known each other for years. Night came fast, and Jack watched the stars from his cabin roof, eyes sharp. Then he saw it alight, far in the distance, blinking red every few seconds. A ship was entering the atmosphere. Slower than before, heavier. This one wasn't scouting. It was coming to take someone. He climbed down and walked back into the cabin. Sarah was already awake, holding her child close. "They're here," he said. She nodded, no fear in her eyes this time, only something stronger, determination. Jack grabbed his rifle, checked the charge, and handed Sarah a small stun baton. It was old, human-made, but it still worked. She looked at it, nodded once, then wrapped her daughter in the thickest blanket and placed her gently into a hidden compartment. Beneath the floor, the girl looked up at her with silent eyes, and Sarah kissed her forehead. "No matter what you hear," she whispered, "stay quiet, stay hidden." Jack closed the hatch carefully, then looked at Sarah. "We hold them here," he said. She stepped beside him, stun baton ready. "Yes," she answered. "We fight together now." Outside, the wind picked up, and in the distance, the faint hum of an engine grew louder. They stood in silence, waiting side by side, a mother with nothing left to lose, and a human who had already lost everything. But this time, neither of them would run. The first footstep landed just beyond the main fence. Jack heard it even through the snow and wind. Heavy, armored, and not alone, he moved toward the window, keeping low, and peeked through the frost-covered glass. 3 figures were moving through the storm, 2 tall aliens in dark body armor, and 1 smaller scout droid flying just above them, blinking red. They weren't trying to sneak. They thought this would be easy. Jack slipped on his coat and turned to Sarah. "They're coming slow." "Like they're not worried," he whispered. She gripped the stun baton tightly, Her eyes focused. "They always underestimate humans," she said. "They think you only grow things and fix things." Jack almost smiled. "Let's remind them I used to break things too." The trapline went off first. A flash of smoke burst near the fence as the first bounty hunter stepped on a hidden plate. The droid reacted instantly, scanning the area, and the second alien raised his blaster butt too late. A net shot from under the snow and wrapped tight around his legs. He fell hard, his weapon skidding across the ground. Jack moved fast, slipping out the side door and into the storm. Sarah stayed inside. Watching the panel that showed their motion sensors, she counted 3 signals, but only 2 were close. The third was circling around, trying to flank. She opened the back window and waited. Breath slow, hands steady. Outside, Jack raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the cold and hit the flying droid right in its core. It exploded. Mid-air, raining sparks, the first alien charged. Yelling something in a deep, metallic voice, Jack dove behind the old fuel tank, dodging return fire that lit up the night like firecrackers. He waited for the right moment, then rolled and fired again, hitting the alien's shoulder and spinning him backward into the snow. 1 left. The third bounty hunter reached the cabin wall silently, climbing over the roof. He thought he was clever. He didn't know Sarah was waiting. As soon as he dropped to the ground behind the house, she struck hard and fast. The stun baton cracked against his armor, then again at his neck where the shield was weak. He staggered, grabbing at her, but she moved like a shadow. Years of survival giving her speed Jack didn't have. 1 more strike, and the last hunter collapsed in the snow. Twitching butt down, Jack returned minutes later, breathing hard, face dusted with frost. "They're all down," he said. "Are you all right?" Sarah nodded, standing over the unconscious alien. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said softly, winning. Jack looked at the 3 bodies in the snow. "This wasn't a win," he said. "It was a warning." Then, "Send more." They dragged the hunters inside, tied them up, and placed them near the storage room. Sarah checked on her daughter, still hidden, still asleep. She closed the panel gently and looked at Jack. "We need to leave," she said. "This place, it's not safe anymore." Jack knew she was right. He had lived here for years. Alone, with nothing but his ghosts. But now, the ghosts were awake. And they brought fire with them. He began packing supplies rations, tools, to weapons. And a worn map of the outer rim. Sarah gathered warm clothes for her child, found old boots, and cleaned the small heater they could carry. They didn't speak much. There wasn't time, but something had changed between them. They were no longer strangers or guests. They were family, in a strange, broken way, and they were going to run together. As the storm grew heavier, Jack opened the front door and looked back one last time. The cabin stood quiet behind him, the only home he had known since the war. Now, it would burn. He tossed a flare inside and watched the fire catch on the dry wood. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like a beginning. Sarah stepped beside him, holding her daughter close. "Where do we go?" she asked. Jack looked up at the stars. "Anywhere they can't find us," he said, "and maybe somewhere she can be free." They walked into the snow, together, leaving fire and smoke behind them, and though the cold bit at their skin, they didn't stop, because now they had something stronger than fear. They had each other. The snowstorm followed them for 2 days. Jack led the way through old mining paths, cutting across frozen rivers and dead woods. Sarah carried her daughter wrapped close to her chest. Moving carefully with her injured leg, she never complained. Not once. Jack kept checking behind them, watching for shadows in the sky or strange shapes in the distance. So far, no one had followed, but he knew it wouldn't last by the 3rd night. They reached a small abandoned outpost, rusted and quiet, half buried under years of snow. Jack cleared a path through the door and started a fire using parts from a broken heater. Sarah lay beside her daughter, brushing the girl's silver hair gently. The child had begun to talk, whispering soft alien words that Jack didn't understand. But one word she kept repeating sounded like Papa. Sarah noticed it too and looked over at Jack with soft eyes. He didn't correct the child. He only nodded and gave her half of his food ration. Later that night, Jack pulled out the small device he had taken from the last bounty hunter. It looked like a communicator, but it had a strange symbol glowing faintly on the side. When he tapped it, a message played, not in words, but in coordinates. Jack studied them for a long time, then looked at Sarah. "They know where we're going," he said. Sarah leaned in, worry growing in her face. "Then we change direction," she said. "We find another world." Jack shook his head slowly. "This isn't just tracking, Sarah," he said. "This is a beacon tied to her blood." Sarah froze, her hands clutching the blanket tighter. "They encoded her DNA into the signal," he said. "Anyone looking for her will always find her." Sarah didn't speak for a moment. Her eyes dropped to her daughter, sleeping peacefully beside her. "She'll never be safe," she whispered. "Not unless I give her up." Jack knelt down and took her hand. "No," he said, "that's not an option." He looked back at the communicator, thinking, "There might be a way to hide her signal," he said, "but we'll need help, real help." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "No one helps us," she said. "They only want what she carries." Jack stood and reached into his pack, pulling out a folded map and a small chip. "I know someone," he said. "A smuggler owes me a life debt. She works near the Black Ridge on Delta 9. Underground stuff, tech, identity wipes, everything." Sarah looked at him with disbelief. "You trust her?" Jack didn't answer for a long time, then said, "No, but I trust what she can do." The next day, they traveled again. No trails, no signals, no trackers left behind. Jack disabled every beacon, broke the cum chips, and set more traps in the snow to mislead anyone following. They moved through ice tunnels and old cargo routes, places Jack only knew from war days. Each night, they slept in silence, and each morning, the little girl spoke more, sometimes alien, sometimes broken human words. She laughed once when Jack slipped and fell in a puddle of melting ice. Sarah laughed too, for the first time, her voice soft and real. Jack couldn't remember the last time he heard something like that. On the fifth night, they finally reached the lower port of Deltanine. The place was a maze of rusted ships and thick smoke. Shadows moved everywhere, some watching, some just trying to survive. Sarah pulled her hood low, her daughter wrapped tightly on her back. Jack led them to a door marked only by an old red handprint inside. The air was warm and filled with the smell of oil and metal. A woman stepped out from behind a pile of cables, gray hair, cybernetic eye, and a long scar down her cheek. She smiled when she saw Jack. "You look like you fought a starship and lost," she said. Jack grinned. "Still standing," he said. "Need a favor?" Her eyes moved to Sarah and the child, then narrowed. "That's not just a favor," she said. Jack held up the chip with the DNA signal. "She needs to disappear," he said. "Forever." The woman stared at the child for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It'll cost you everything," she said. Jack looked at Sarah, then at the little girl. "Then take everything," he said. "Just give her a chance to grow up." They stayed hidden in the workshop for 3 days while the smuggler, Kira, worked. She was fast, smart, and didn't ask too many questions. She scanned the child, wiped the DNA signal, then rewrote her ID using human records. By the end of the third night, the alien girl no longer existed in any system, not as a royal, not as a bounty, not as prey. Now, she was just a child. Free. Sarah stood at the table as Kira handed her a new ID card. It showed the girl's name, a human name, now Lena, and under parents. It listed Jack, Trent, and Sarah Wren. Sarah looked at the name for a long time, then turned to Jack. "You're her father now," she said quietly. Jack didn't argue. He just nodded and held out his hand to the little girl. She smiled and ran into his arms. He lifted her gently, holding her close, like she had always been his. Kira watched them in silence, then reached into her coat. She pulled out a small data key and handed it to Jack. "Coordinates to a quiet place," she said. "Outer zone, unclaimed, safe." Jack took it, his voice low. "Thank you, Kira." Gave him a long look. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just don't let the galaxy take her again." They left the same night, using a stolen ship with a clean registry. No one noticed them, no alarms were triggered, no bounty updates came. The galaxy had moved on, and so did they. The journey took 3 weeks, across star lanes and empty space. Jack taught Lena how to read a star chart. Sarah showed her how to cook with dried fruit and heat powder. The child laughed often now, chasing light inside the ship hulls, hiding in cabinets, calling Jack Papa in both tongues, and Jack. He smiled again. Every day, a little more. They arrived on the quiet planet at dawn. It was green and full of mist, with rolling hills and strange singing birds. No cities, no trackers, no warships, only wind and sky. Jack built a small house on a hill using scrap from the ship and local wood. Sarah grew herbs in the garden, the same way her mother had before the invasion. Lena played with sticks and stones, pretending they were spaceships, laughing in the sun. Sometimes Jack sat under the shade and watched her. Sometimes Sarah joined him, and they sat without speaking, just breathing together, alive and whole. One night, as stars filled the sky, Lena crawled between them, holding their hands. "Will they come back?" she asked softly. Jack looked down at her and said, "If they do, they'll meet your mother first." Sarah smiled at him. "And your father next," she added. Lena smiled and fell asleep, safe between the two people who gave up everything. For her, the fire crackled beside them, and above, the stars burned bright, not as threats, not as reminders of war, but as hope, as freedom, as proof that even in a cruel galaxy, love could still survive. Jack looked over at Sarah, her face calm. Glowing in the firelight, he had started this alone, nothing but pain in his heart. Now, he had something worth more than any past. He had a future. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he whispered softly, "We're home."